Welcome to the Decades Reloaded community podcast, the Mental Health Mixtape, where we will be talking all things mental health related in every aspect of life, connecting with local communities and fitness professionals. We're here to start the conversation around mental health and make a difference. So join us, take a listen and be part of the conversation. Okay. Hi, Jules.
Hi.
Welcome to the Decades Reloaded community podcast, the Mental Health Mixtape. I'm really pleased that you got back in touch to come on and have a chat with us today. I'm very, very excited to have you on, actually. So just for anyone who's tuning in and hasn't found you on social media already, just tell us a little bit about who you are and your business so we can get a feel, and then we're going to crack on today.
Hi. Well, yeah, I'm very excited too. So I am Jules Lowe, Jules Lowe Counselling. That's what it says on the tin. I'm a counsellor. I counsel all sorts of different clients with all sorts of different needs. But I do tend to be drawn to, and they tend to be drawn to me, people surrounding bereavement and loss. And I'll say that we're going to concentrate on bereavement today, but I do want to point out that loss is so much more than just death. It is very much, basically anything where you thought your future was going to be one thing and it's now not what you planned it to be. And the biggest thing is death. And I will say death a lot because we need to say that word, in my opinion. We skirt around it. I bet we'll talk about that. But also it could be a relationship. It could just be identity. It could be, I don't know who I am anymore. And all of that is involved with grief. So I do I've obviously read a lot about it and worked with a lot of clients, and it is my passion to sort of spread the word a bit more about how I believe we should be talking about it.
Excellent. Actually, you hit me really hard actually as soon as you said that, just because like from terms of loss, I hadn't really even thought about it that way before, but it's something that personally, I guess you could say I'm experiencing a little bit now because obviously when I first connected with you online, I explained to you about losing my mum, and then we've spoken since, and that we've now lost all of my mum's side of the family with my nana passing away just in September. So and that feeling of loss as well as the grief, like it feels like I've lost half of my identity. Because there's lots of things, when you sort of, we won't stay on this topic because obviously we're going to talk about the bereavement side of things today, but when you, as you go through different stages of your life, you talk to your elders if they're around, or they'll just in passing go, oh, you used to do that. As you, like, your children grow up and they'll say, oh, you used to be like that. All the things that you don't actually know about your younger self, or about your family and your family's history, there's no connection to that anymore. There's no one. I'm the top of the tier in the family, well, with my big sister, but there's only a couple of years between us, and that's it now. Like, the information sharing, so to speak, has just stopped. And that has been, my nana was 89, and I got it in my head, even though she was fine and it was unexpected, there was a point where I'd gone, okay, she's probably not going to be around forever now. And I was pretty much geared up for that in a sense. But I hadn't been prepared for that complete loss of identity where I've lost half of my history with her.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even thought about that as being such a big thing to talk about. So I'm so glad you've just mentioned that. And I'm already going to have to drag you back on here now for another morning of my waffling. So we can discuss that in more detail.
Well, I think that is linked with bereavement as well. As you say, so often clients come to me because they've experienced a death. But actually, when you start to unpick it, there's so much more to it. There's so many more what we call secondary losses attached to it, because that loss of that person involves so much more than just the sadness of that, them not being there. It is, as you say, like, especially when you get to, I'm going to say, certain age that I am, and you start getting to the realization that, wait, hold on, if my parents aren't here, then it's me next. whoa, I'm not an adult enough. Like what? Like
No.
so it's there's all of these secondary losses
Yeah,
that you experience, and we sometimes don't give them space.
no, that is so poignant. Like I hadn't, oh God, I hadn't even thought, oh my God, I'm the next one in line.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. And here's the time to work it out.
I think, and actually that's kind of pivotal to one of the things that I wanted to just sort of go over today is we lost my mum when she was 54. That is not an age that you expect a parent to pass
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
So I guess it had never really crossed my mind, oh, I'd be next because my mum was young and I was 29.
Yeah.
So, there was nothing crossing my mind. Although I saw a reel on Instagram the other day with a bunch of 18 to 20 sort of 1-year-olds talking about age and who's old, and anyone over 25 is old. What? What? Oh my God, I'm a granny. I haven't got to 40 yet. And I've just realised I'm one of those people that I used to consider old when I was out clubbing. When did this start?
But also these I will try not to digress too much, but actually someone's perception of old, and there's been studies about, it depends on who you ask. It depends on how old the person you ask is as to how old is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? When I turned 30, it was a distant memory now, but when I turned 30, it was by far the best year of my life, which probably sounds bizarre because I just lost my mum and I
Yeah.
had a 1-year-old and my life was completely on its head. I walked away from my career of 12 years. I've lost the plot with my personality disorder, which probably isn't the best term of phrase to use for it, but I'm very comfortable with that and I don't stigmatize myself. Um, and so it sounds balmy to say it was the best year of my life, but equally, I had so much fun. I learned who the important people were in my life because they were the only ones that stuck around when I lost my mum.
Yeah.
Um, I was happy in my relationship. I had the son that I'd been trying really hard for that we never thought was going to happen. And I embarked on this full-time dance fitness career, which was just the sideline beforehand, and gone, okay, let's turn my life on its head. And actually, do you know what? It was just a really happy year of my life, aside
Yeah.
from the grief side of things. And I feel like that was the most transformative year of my life. And it's like I hadn't been born yet until that year. I was just coasting by being a person that actually I wasn't.
Yeah.
Just trying to fit the mold and fit in with everyone and get on with everyone and everything else. And then I think, well, when you lose a parent, it just goes, don't care about anyone else anymore. Just going to do what I want to do now.
Yeah. And I think we search for meaning. We search for, we're desperate to work out why that happened. And part of it is the grim reality that actually sometimes it doesn't make sense. And we find that really hard. And a lot of the reason, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you and say, yes, now I want to talk about it is because so often, I mean, even some counselors are like, oh no, death. Oh. And I'm like, no, like it is such a part of life. And we can't fix it. The biggest thing is we can't fix it. We are such a medical society now. We want to fix everything. Of course we do. We don't want to say goodbye to our loved one, and we just can't fix it. So what we often do now is we just go, I just can't see it, and then it's not going to happen. And actually, once you experience a bereavement close to you, you realize there is that realization of, oh God, it's going to happen to not the grim reality of it will happen to us one day as well, but also that we're going to experience this loss. And I mean, one of the things that, in the grief counselling world, it's very much, as soon as someone says something about stages of grief, there's a real like, oh no, like there's a groan. And it's absolutely no shade on Kubler-Ross. Big up to her. Like the point is her research was about terminally ill patients in a hospice. It was very specific. It was really illuminating at the time, but she herself was very much like, no, this is not a linear process. And I think even the stages of grief, this idea that we can just get over it, we complete it, boom, we've got to the acceptance stage and now we're absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I think even though, you know, in sort of grief counselling circles, that's very much, that's not really how we think it works now. I think society, people in general, are just desperate for that to be the case because we don't like this pain. It's just work. No one can almost warn you about it. You can have sympathy for it and go, oh, yeah, that must be really sad. But when you feel it yourself and you feel it in your body, no one can prepare it for you, like prepare you for it. You just want it to go away, but you can't.
No.
And you'll feel all those things.
Go on.
No, well, no, I'm like, you can tell I'm on one.
Yeah. Because I'd said to you, hadn't I, that I wanted to discuss the stages of grief, and that's exactly why I wanted to discuss it, because it is such a different journey for everyone, and there is no, you don't just stop grieving someone, in my personal opinion. Obviously, it's not my specialism, and I know that through purely personal circumstance, and I also, you know, sort of, I don't know what the right term is, but I had in my head before I lost anyone what grief would look and feel like. So I'm a bit of a worrywart, and I hadn't really lost anyone that poignant in my life. So until we lost my great nana, but I just turned 18. I saw her once in a blue moon. She was just kind of my really, really elderly great nan who was sort of sticking around, who brought me a new video cassette every Christmas with a Disney film, you know?
Yeah.
Other films available too. Right, I'm not the BBC. So but I used to think, oh, I don't think I'm ever going to survive if anything happens to one of my grandparents. I was so lucky. I had all 4 grandparents growing up. So, well, technically, because my granddad on my dad's side is his stepdad, but he's been in my dad's life since long before I came along, because my dad's dad passed away when he was young. So, he's very much my granddad, and we've been very blessed to have all 4 of them. And I always thought, I'm so close to them. I go and see them all the time. Like I was literally staying at their houses nearly as much as I was at my own growing up, even as a teen. And I just wouldn't be able to cope if something happened to them. Obviously, at this point, it had never crossed my mind that I would have to say goodbye to one of my parents. But I had like this idea in my head of what that would feel like. And then when I actually lost someone, well, it was a whole different ballgame. It wasn't what I imagined. Well, it was in terms of completely heart crippling internal pain, but you can't process what your grief is going to look like for each individual person, and it is different per person and what their relationship is. And I mentioned to you before, I'm kind of a little bit like over death now, in a way, because I think people think it's harsh when I say there's not much that tops losing a parent. There is, and I'm not going to talk about that because they're my littlest things, and I don't ever want to talk about anything happening to them. I think in my head that is the only thing that could possibly be worse. But there's, you know, as much as my grandparents have been exceptionally important in my life, losing my mum first was like the worst case scenario. When you can get through that, you kind of lose someone else. Go, okay, well, I got through this, so I will get through this too. And it just looks so different depending on who it is. And then you said about obviously stages of grief in terms of terminally ill patients. Well, I grieve very differently from my granddad, who had Parkinson's and dementia and slowly slipped away, as to say my nan, who just went out of the blue. And my auntie, she had terminal cancer, and she was ticking around for 12 years with it. And it was her second time around with it, you know, not terminal, obviously, the first time. And so those processes were so different because you're prepared for them. You're not prepared for someone young to go with cancer, but you grieve at different times, don't you? You kind of grieve whilst they're still alive when you know it's coming. Whereas when it's a shock, you've got to, like you say, accept that first before you can even start to.
Yeah, and
Talking so much at you.
and I'm going to point. I'm classic counsellor. I can't not be. I'm going to
Yeah.
point out something that you said really early on when you said, "I'm not the expert in this," and I'm like, well, do you know what? You're the expert in how you've experienced it, and that's part of it. I can put some names on that. I can say, oh, that sounds like anticipatory grief, and part of my role, I believe that everyone experiences grief differently. It involves so many different factors, as you say, whether you're expecting it, whether you're not, the relationship that you have with that person, that bond that you have while they're alive. You know, it's not just a parent. It depends on the relationship you had with that parent. It depends on the attachment style, but also it depends on where you are in your life, how you're feeling about yourself, the system, so your family around you, the support you get, like, and you, all those different experiences that make you so uniquely, wonderfully you, are going to have an impact on how you grieve. And but I like to try and put ands instead of buts in my phrases nowadays. There's also the concept that you're not alone, because actually the more I speak to clients, the more that I read, the more that I just delve into the whole world, I found that so much of the reason I came into this was I was reading for myself and going, yeah, whoa, that's how I feel. And actually now I can say, actually, you're not alone in this. And that, for instance, when you talked about actually when I was 30, that was the best year of my life. That can sometimes, I could hear you go, oh, I know that's a bit like, oh, am I that? But my mum died. It can be because actually that sounds to me maybe like one of my favorite grief process models, because I have those these days, is the dual process model. Strobe and Strut, 1999. Yeah, I can still do it. But I can reference it, but more to the point, it makes so much more sense to me and a lot of my clients, because they talk about two different orientations. They talk about the loss orientation, where you are in the grief, snot, tears, wailing, maybe privately, maybe publicly, but I am just distraught and what is this? But and sometimes clients avoid that bit. They don't want to go there. That feels too scary, but it's needed for the coping bit. But also the other side of the model is you kind of oscillate between the two, is the restoration bit. And sometimes I find clients, they're going, is it okay that I went for afternoon tea and had and laughed? Because I'm grieving. And what if mum knows that I was laughing and I'm still sad? And it's like, and whereas denial has been seen to be a bit of a bad way. Oh no, they're denying it, they're not grieving, they're not. Actually, it's also what you need to cope. And that model suggests that you go between the two, and it might be in the space of a day, it might be in the space of a month or a year eventually, but there'll be moments that you can really move. I was going to say move on, and I was like, no. But work through that and see those new beginnings and those new starts and how life is going to be without that person. But also you still have those moments where you go, oh, but I really wish they were here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that it can feel really, once you start realizing that it's not just you that's doing that, that can feel so comforting.
Sure, it's the phrase that I heard so much in that time was, you will find a new normal. And I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with that term, because now I kind of get it, but nothing's never going to be that normal again. So it's not really a new normal, it's a new life, it's a new path, or like you say, like a transition, or it's the two just run in parallel together. And even this morning, so I've had to gut my whole ensuite. It's become a job that I wasn't supposed to have to do. I was supposed to just be replacing the shower enclosure. Um, and I've opened a new shower enclosure today, which has been sat for 4 months, and it's bent. And I've already had to replace plasterboard, buy a new shower, take all the tiles off, all jobs I didn't want to do. And I just looked at it and I thought, oh, for goodness sake. And then my mum's song, ABBA, Dancing Queen, came on Alexa.
Mm,
And I
mm,
just burst out laughing because I was
mm.
like, she's just telling me, do you know what? There's worse things in life, Lucy. Chill
Yeah,
out. Let's have a sing song and just go do the school run and get on.
yeah, yeah,
And it's such a full circle moment when I mean, there is still days where, like you say, it will sneak up on you
yeah,
and you're just like, oh, and it's horrible and it just takes you.
yeah,
But other times you can find little moments and just have a little laugh or just go, oh, do you know what? I know they're, depending on what you believe in, I know there's somewhere in this universe still
yeah,
giving me little reminders, and saying I'm
yeah.
still here somewhere. I know that's not for everyone, but we all
But there
believe in
is
something.
there is something in, and like music, especially, like again, continuing bonds and class and all. I can name everybody as well, but the idea of continuing bonds is that you don't lose that bond with that person. It's different, sure, it's different, but especially I personally find music like that is my biggest sort of continuing
Yeah,
bond in terms of how I continue my relationship with my loved one, because sometimes you can control it. And I've had clients who've gone, do you know what, I thought about what you said and I listened to the piece of music that we played at the funeral and I sobbed and sobbed, but then I pressed pause or stop, like I went, and I've had enough now and I'm going to move on, and almost having that control over it. Other times, as you say, it comes on like Strictly or Play a Song. That's my classic. Like it's
yeah.
my classic sob is, oh no, but
I want to
oh,
watch them
how,
dancing at the same time as
yeah,
listening to it.
I'm gone. And my husband knows it. He looks and he goes,
Yeah,
yeah, I know, but
uh,
let it out, because actually
yeah,
that is me remembering how important that person was to me. And it brings the tears, but let those tears out. But also, as you say, there's times when you just, that sharing of a story or that, oh God, I know, like there's
yeah,
so much about how you, again, and I realized that I was sort of saying new normal and feeling a bit like, what? I don't know how I feel about it, but
yeah,
you are still Megan Devine talks about carrying your grief, and it's working out how to carry the grief. You can't ditch it. It's like a rock. You can't just throw it away because it keeps on bouncing back for some reason. You can't just ignore it, but it's working out how to carry it. And one of those ways is by, I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to have those fond memories of them. I'm going to listen to that music and really, really remember them, rather than trying to, oh no, I need to move on. I need to get on
yeah.
with my life, because I don't know who effectively does.
No, I think, well, for me personally, I'd love for our listeners to share their own personal experience on this. That, like, continuing bonds, I love that phrase.
Mhm.
That's a great term. Um, and we talk about nostalgia a lot in Decades
Mhm.
Reloaded and the importance of that nostalgia because of those memories. And now I know also it's called continuing bonds and things
Yeah,
like that. And how that can be great for lifting your mood, but quite often nostalgia gets a bad reputation because it can also have the opposite effect. Like you say, like a song can
yeah,
either make you sad or it can make you really happy and have a
yeah,
laugh. And for me, it was really important to be able to listen to Dancing Queen again
yeah, yeah,
and to be able to dance to it in her memory. And we
yeah.
did on the 8-year anniversary in April. I was at a big fitness event in Blackpool on stage, and I'd said to them that it's the 8-year anniversary of my mum
Mhm.
on that day. So can I do my slot on that day? And they said yeah. And I'd said to everybody in the session that this is the scenario. This is the song I want us to cool down to. I want everyone to just have a sing and a dance and share a bit of love. If I decide I'm just going to blub and not get
Mhm.
through it, we're going to do this other cool down.
Yeah,
But if it comes on, I just want everyone to get together and have a bit of a hug and
yeah,
just share love. And we put it on. I held it together. It was a beautiful moment, and it was so important to be able to have a beautiful association with a nice memory
Yeah.
to that song, but in her honor,
Yeah.
rather than always considering it, oh, we played it at her funeral, so I
Yeah.
can't listen to that anymore. So, you know, it's one of the most popular songs
Oh,
played
yeah,
in
you're
the
not going to avoid
world.
that, are you? Yeah.
Can't avoid it anywhere. And I was just like, I need to find a way to be able to listen to that again. So that's really useful information to know,
Yeah.
because other people might start to take comfort in the same way and keep those continuing bonds going through their music choices as well.
And I think there's so many ways, but you're right. Nostalgia does get a bit of a bad rap, like in rep, in terms of like,
Yeah,
oh no. I mean, I'm again, other films are available, but Inside Out 2, when nostalgia comes out, and you're like,
yeah,
oh. But
yeah,
actually, that nostalgia, it does. I read on your website about that whole. It has so many. It can bring back so many emotions, and actually, if that's you're not living in the past, and I think this is what people they're not
yeah.
moving forward, they're living in the past. You know that you're not living in the past, but you're bringing some of that person with you. And there's lots of ways, you can, if they were like good at baking, maybe they taught you how to bake a certain cake. If you bake that cake, yeah, it can feel really sad as well. It can feel really like, oh, I wish they were here. But look, I'm remembering them and I'm imagining them here. They're still with me. I'm still carrying it, because it won't go away. You
No,
can't just complete grief. Done it, mate.
no.
Off move.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Yeah, because they're part of you. You can't. I often have clients saying, I just want to be back where I was. It's like, you just can't, because you're not that person anymore. But it is about, what can I do with it? How can I carry it? How can I carry it so it starts off, so I like that rock idea, because it's so heavy to begin with.
Yeah,
And it's not that the rock gets any lighter, it doesn't go away, but we just get better at managing it and working out where it fits in our life and growing around it. And as you say, that transformation, I think that idea that, and again, I have to really caveat it, because some people go, but I'm supposed to be having an epiphany and I just feel awful. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. And often, people are expecting to have that life-changing moment where they, oh, I understand what life is about. And so if you're there listening and you're thinking, oh, I just feel awful. Yeah, that might be the case. And also, a number of people, and I know with my own experience, that actually it's the worst thing that happened to me. Is potentially, as you say, one of the worst things that will ever happen to me. And not but, yeah. And I look at everything I've done since. I look at all that realization of life is short. I don't know how long I've got left. That can feel really grim, but actually, do you know what? I'm going to make the most of every single moment that I can. I'm going to do what I can to have this ripple effect and try and have a positive impact on as many people as possible, and also just go and say yes to things. Yeah, I'm going to stop feeling scared and going, oh, I'll do that one day. I'm just going to do it now. And that is the experience I've felt with lots of others as well. It's not the silver lining. It's not the, but at least we can go and do this now. It's and there can be so much growth around loss.
yeah. We talk about that a lot, in terms of trying, it's the outlook on the experience,
Mm-hmm.
and what you can take away from that experience as a positive, which I think sometimes people find obscure. When I say, oh, if this hadn't have happened, I now wouldn't be changing people's lives and training people in being able to support their fitness communities with their mental health, and I wouldn't be touching all these lives locally or in communities up and down the UK, and that had to happen for me to change my own life and for my own happiness and to actually reach and help other people. And it wouldn't have done, I don't think,
Mm-hmm.
if the things that have happened along the way hadn't manifested.
Yeah.
Sometimes I know it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? Everything happens for a reason.
Mhm.
But I really believe in that.
Mm.
I really believe in that. And I think that helps.
Yeah.
But I liked your rock analogy because we talk
Yeah.
about diamonds forming under pressure. And we
Yeah.
have those diamonds, and obviously they will start as a rock, and the weight is very heavy and it's very dark and very, but then a bit of pressure and a bit of polishing up, and everybody's very unique
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
invaluable, like a diamond.
Yeah.
Um, and even just the way the light hits the diamond, it can just change the perspective and the way things look
Mhm.
just based on what's shining through it. And so I love that you talk about the sort of rock being that way at the very start of the bereavement process as well, because I think it's very similar to that
Yeah.
journey in a lot of things with mental health. So you mentioned about people not wanting, well, choose the right words, not wanting to own it, but like owning it. Sometimes avoiding
Mhm.
the feeling really sad and the messy crying and
Yeah.
the letting it all out. Um, I've been very different depending on who we've lost.
Mhm.
And I've know, unfortunately, a lot of people, especially recently, who have all lost parents, partners,
Mhm.
children, and everybody responds so differently. But there does seem to be this horrible stigma.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm carrying on and I'm carrying the load so
So
well. And
yeah.
I've lost somebody who's so important to me, but I am still putting a brave face on. I'm still working. I'm still smiling. I'm still owning my life, and I'm not falling apart. And then it gets shared all over the world and all over social media, and everyone goes, "But I'm not holding it together. So does that mean I'm failing?" No, you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. We
No one's
still have
holding it together.
we still have such a thing about, oh, they're so strong. And actually, I'll put out as well, sometimes people don't cry. And I again have people come in, but I'm not crying. Like I should be
Yeah,
crying. There are no shoulds. And
no,
maybe there's lots of reasons why the tears aren't there, you know, and again, it's this whole fear of, am I not doing it right? You can't do grief wrong. You just can't,
no.
because it's yours. So you do it how you do you, hun, but you do it how
Yeah,
you want to do it. And there does seem to be this, as you say, this, they're doing ever so well. Are they really? Or are they just very much in that, I'm gonna keep going, I'm gonna keep going? Because that grief is waiting.
yeah.
And I
And it
do, I mean,
comes.
I work especially with a lot of men who, and
Yeah,
I don't like, again, gender stereotypes, but who feel like, if I start letting out any emotion, I'm going to splurge, I'm going to be a mess. And actually, especially with counselling, what we can do, I say it's like a fizzy pop, like in a bottle that you've really shaken up, and you're shaken up, you can just really start to let it out. And that fear of, oh my God, it's going to go everywhere, if you let it out really gradually, and then you turn the top, you turn the bottle top back off in,
yeah,
and it's that containing, but people are so scared of doing it.
absolutely. And um, I mean, I don't really like crying. We had this conversation on the way to my nan's funeral. Don't like crying, and a few of us sort of
Mm,
in the family said I don't really like crying, but all for very different reasons. I don't like it because I hate being snotty afterwards. It gives me a really
mhm,
bad headache, and I hold this
mhm.
headache for about 2 days after. Generally, just hate crying. Also, it's not very comfortable to turn around and go to people. Do you know what? I feel awful. I feel
Yeah,
so sad.
yeah.
And I think so many people feel like that. And I think, you know, I don't believe that that's being strong. In fact, I believe that that's really, that's a difficulty letting out how I'm feeling, and it does manifest.
Mm,
You can't hold on to it.
mhm.
When you do, it catches up with you. It's like trying to run away from a steam train with no brakes. Just it's going to catch you at some point, but it might come out different to how it does for everybody else.
Yeah,
So I love that. But
yeah,
so you said you work with a lot of men. This month's actually men's mental health
yeah.
awareness month. So what what would you say to any? This is a little bit off piece from what I said we were going to talk about, but in a sense, what would you say to any men listening that perhaps are bereaved right now or struggling with loss or anything else that you can support them with, in terms of overcoming this stigma around opening up and talking, which we know that men particularly struggle with. They don't have as much of a social support network because lads don't talk about their feelings. And I did a post yesterday about not stereotyping, but men, like as the figures show, don't tend to participate in group exercise, which means they don't have that social aspect, which is as important as the exercise itself, mental health, which is why group exercise is proven to be more beneficial than exercising alone. Generally, men tend to run on their own, go in the gym on their own. Like it's always alone, and they're not talking. They haven't got that social aspect, and they're not so adept at opening up. And I would suspect you would know the figures on this, but not quite so good at coming forward and asking for therapy either.
And I read your post yesterday and I was like, yeah, because actually, I mean, my own experience of group exercise, like that genuinely helped me so much through my own grief process, in terms of there'd be days when I'd go to club exercise and I'd be with my like glow sticks and sobbing, because it was just a space where I could let it out. Such a community, just a wonderful experience of just being with other people. And I think, the men that I talk to, and again, I'm so conscious not to stereotype, but there is this thing of, but where do I go? And, we generally, again, stereotypically, women, it's so acceptable to go for a coffee and go, I've had a day. This is what's happened. And it just seems so much harder. This whole phrase of, man up and all of this. And I've got to say, I've been surprised with how many men have come to me and really not, I would always say please, but I am, because actually they come to me and they say, you are my safe space. I can talk and I know you're not going to judge me. And I know, and so many of them are there saying, what if I let it out? What will happen? I'm here to contain it. It's yours. It's not mine. You're not gonna pass it on. But just that experience of talking, and it's interesting that it tends to be there's a lot of younger men who are coming who are there saying, I need help, and I want to do things differently to dad, granddad, and I think there's a slow change, and that's my hope in that, because I come out going, right, I need to solve this, but I'm a recovering rescuer, and I have to work out that the whole of, but I think for men, just knowing that you're not alone, and that actually there are men going to counselling, there are men saying, do you know what? I'd need to talk. And there are lots of men's groups out there now, like Andy's men's club, and there are lots of different things starting to come up. But actually, that step towards going to see a counsellor, it is still I don't know the statistics exactly, but it's still seen as often women. But actually there are men who are going, and it is confidential, it is a safe space, and I'm really proud that the men that I see really benefit from it and say, I know that I can come every Thursday and just go. But it's that talking, and you don't have to be strong, depending on what you see as the word strong means, as well, as you say.
Absolutely. And I think because there is such not necessarily just with men, but there's such a stigma around feeling like a burden to people, or feeling like people are bored of hearing the same thing over again, or shouldn't you be over it by now? Like, you don't just sometimes you don't necessarily ever get over it. You just navigate it and learn to live with it, and if you engage with a therapist that you have a good rapport relationship with, because let's face it, it's like finding the right pair of trainers. Definitely. You do have to try a few on to make sure you've got a comfortable fit. I mean, I saw a bereavement counselor and she was wonderful and lovely, but I need an approach where people kind of like tell me how to process my thoughts back. I need I need telling what to do. I have BPD. If I'm left to my own devices, all carnage could materialize. But she was a wonderful, active listener and just sort of nodded, repeated back to me what I was saying to her. So I knew she was listening
Yeah.
and everything else. But it just wasn't for me. And then I've seen counsellors over the years who have somehow managed to get me to talk about things that I was never going to tell anyone ever, burst into tears, leave an absolute snotty mess. And I thought, they do that. I was so ready to not cry. But they were obviously just like the right person. And you do have to find the right one. And when you do, then that worry, it becomes a safe, comfortable space, like you say. And you're not worrying about putting onto your loved ones, who too might actually be going through that process themselves, or actually be triggering for them if they've been through a similar scenario. And we spoke before about like sympathy and empathy and being relatable, but sometimes you don't want people to empathize with you. You don't want them to say, yeah, me too. You just want them to listen.
That's awful for you. That's not,
Yeah. You know, I have BPD, as I say. So for me, like my way of empathizing is to relate and say I relate. And it's a bit of a trait with the BPD and it's a trait with ADHD. It's not detracting away from other people's feelings and emotions. It's my way of saying, I really feel what you're saying to me and I understand and I'm here for you because I get it.
Yeah.
But even I know that sometimes you don't want someone to tell you that they've been through it too. You just want to just go, get it all out. And someone say, okay, have you thought about this? Shall we try this? What's the next step? With a very non-judgmental, clear, concise, let's do this. And it sounds like that's something that more people need to benefit from.
And it is. And I mean, I was one of our friends calls me Death and Sparkle because I am the most, it's all about death. It's all about, I will talk about those things. I will ask clients about those things. I will go, right, how are you feeling? How, as in, really, let's talk about it. Let's not skirt around any of this. But also, I can't not be hi. I'm not all the time. And obviously, like if someone's telling me something really awful, I will feel it. And I realized there was a point, I keep on hitting my heart today because I'm like, oh, but the point is it can be enjoyable as well. It can be. It's not about putting that silver lining and making everything okay, which is what I used to do. I'm going to be honest. I'm a recovering rescuer. I was constantly, but let's make everything better. No, actually sit with that empathy is sitting in that pain and going, that's really hard. And actually sometimes it's that giving that space, because as you say, people are so worried about, oh, but how am I going to make the other person feel, especially as you say, when so often if somebody's died, it's affected everyone around you. So who do you talk to? And as you say, people sort of say to me, oh, but I don't want to like drag the mood down. But actually, if you find your tribe, you find your person, you find a counsellor that you feel that you really relate to, you're not bringing them down, you're letting them out, you're making people feel less alone. And actually, that idea that we can have not an inappropriate laugh, but there's joy that can come out of it too. It's sensitive, it's not inappropriate, but it is just that, as you say, like do you remember when they did that? Like, what a fond memory that is. What a wonderful moment. And that kind of, that is often said, grief is love with nowhere to go. And I think the more that we can really like just celebrate that love as well, that love is still there, and that fondness, I'm not saying every relationship is like that, and obviously there's lots of complicated emotions, and people might think I'm supposed to say how much I miss them, and I just don't. Yeah, but if there is that love there, that just I was gonna say dwelling in it, but in a good way, that whole kind of just like, how lucky am I to have known that? How lucky am I to have felt that and felt loved? And that goes, and with that sadness of, and they're not here. But if we park it completely, if we try and just get rid of it, we're not feeling that love as well. And that nostalgia in a good way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think what we can take away from this conversation today is it's okay to get angry. It's okay to get sad, but it's okay to be joyful and happy and feel like you can carry on without those people. And it doesn't mean that you've forgotten them and that love is carrying on. And it doesn't mean, you know, it's got nowhere to go. It's going to stay with you forever. You're always going to love them and you don't have to stop loving them. You just, it's a process and it's a
loving them in a
messy,
different way.
unpredictable revolution, sort of transformative process. But it's one that we all need to embrace in a sense when we get to it, and try and feel a little bit more comfortable with owning, would you say? Instead of fearing the idea of grief and, like you said, the expectation that we're all supposed to go through certain stages and be over it at some point. It's not the case. And I hope that people hear this and they worry less about feeling that they should be over something, because you can, you know, like you lose friendships or a career or, you know, a home. People are experiencing right now, you know, as well as loved ones, and or, you know, like a change in a relationship with somebody close to you, you grieve for that in a sense, don't you? And it's okay to do that. It's absolutely fine to do that. And if the people around you, if you don't feel comfortable talking to them, or you're concerned about that, people like you are there, very skilled, very knowledgeable, very supportive, to give a good listening ear.
And so much of it is finding your tribe. And, you know, my job is not there to fix things. They, you know, people sometimes come and say, here it is, off you go. And I'm like, no. I genuinely believe that people have it in them to fix, not to fix, to just grow and to heal and to realize that they're wonderful. They've got all of it within themselves. But the relationship that we can have can then help them in their relationships outside as well, in the real world. So yeah, it's a gift to walk alongside people and to get to know them and get to see them, as you say, sort of grow and transform.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh, Jules, thanks so much for coming on today and talking about this subject. Death and Sparkle is probably my new favourite phrase.
It's mine.
Especially when so much light can come out of it as well. And I think that makes it a really much more approachable subject. I think everything we've discussed, even though we've touched on sort of from personal perspectives, I think hopefully will be reassuring for other people, and hopefully people will reach out to yourself if they're in the area. Do you do online as well? Or
I do online, so I can cater for anyone in the country. I do online,
So people can contact you and get support if they need to. It's there. There's plenty of other services online as well. So we know that funded services are rather difficult right now to get involved in. But if anybody's in a situation where they can come and get some additional support from yourself, then that option is there. So I think we're definitely going to have to do a whole nother one around loss and continued bonds as well, because I'm really fascinated for you to go into way more detail about that, because I'm sure you could as well.
Whistle stop tour,
Cool, yeah. Lovely. All right, thanks, Jules. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
See you on the podcast again soon.
Thank you.